Good morning, everyone. It's Kate Francis, your host, or it is what it is, or is it? Welcome, all you listeners. And depending on your time zone, I say good morning. You could be the afternoon or the evening. But the good news is that with YouTube or even our audio podcast, you can just join whenever it works for you. It doesn't even have to be on the day we're recording. So that's a good thing. I have an important message before we start today, and that message is we've had emails returned, meaning people that wanted to be put on our mailing lists so that they would get the links to everything. I would say the easiest way to be sure you're on our mailing list is subscribe. There's a button you can push and subscribe. We want people to subscribe because that's what helps us grow, and that's all up to the audience. So just wanted you to know that. Because if you're not getting notifications and you're not getting updates and links, then something went wrong with your email. And don't just take it that you were ignored. Send us another email. Do something. You can send it to my email and I'll pass it up. Did you know, in our topic today, are you ready for this? The women on the block. Now, men tuning in might say, well, this isn't for me. It's going to be all women. And the only thing I can tell you is, it is going to be talking about women, but you learn something, right? And so please stay with us. I would like to have you. In fact, you might have comments that you'll send back that I can read or talk about. Did you know that approximately 16.2 million women live alone in the U.S.? 16.2 million. It's a lot. And so I'm going to break it down in percentages for you so that you know the age brackets. And like I said, it can vary a little bit, but according to the data, these percentages are really close. 49% of women ages 65 and older are unpartnered. 19% of women in the ages 30 to 49 are the least likely to be single, ages 30 to 49. 32% of young women ages 18 to 29 are single. And good for you. You're taking your time to find the right person. 29% of women's ages 50 to 64 live alone. And 42% of women ages 75 and older live alone. Another interesting piece of news about this is that older people living alone is that it's higher in percentages than in place in the world. We have the highest amount in the United States. Isn't that something? These rough percentages that I'm giving you that are really pretty close to accurate present many questions, such as why are these numbers in the U.S. higher than in other parts of the world? Economically, how does that affect not only the women who live alone, but how it can impact their families and their quality of life? Depending on their financial situation, they can either be secure and able to have proper health care and nutritional food and a decent roof over their head and clothes on their back. But maybe with all of that, they can afford luxuries, extras, and they're blessed to be able to have that and do that. However, a large percentage of the 6.2 million are going without. They're scraping by, and needing financial assistance or being ignored, or they're falling between the cracks. They have a job, but it doesn't pay enough to cover the child care. And if they don't even have children, it pays just enough to get them through, especially if they're not on Social Security. So it's a dilemma. Living alone isn't, it comes with its good points and the not so good points. So many people are working at older ages and they're making ends meet and will no doubt work until they pass away. And that's providing their mental and physical health cooperates for that long. So as an aside, and considering that I'm no longer in the younger age bracket, I happen to be one of those women who live alone, and I have for many years. I still work, and hope to continue to work until I pass. I always believe that staying active is good not only for the soul, but for the mind. Now, if I could have had physical activity to that, I'd be in really great shape. But I haven't added that to it. I don't know what I'm waiting for. I happen to look forward to going to work because I love what I do. I like working with people who want to improve their lives. It's kind of humbling to be part of individuals willing to work through issues so they have a better life. It really is a wonderful reward. If I get a reward, it's just knowing that they're doing better. So even with the percentages and pointing out some of the sad and discouraging things that could happen when you live alone, there is much adventure. That's the other side of the coin, and excitement and self-satisfaction to living alone, recognizing your weaknesses and your strengths, doing things the way you enjoy doing them, and learning to do things you never thought you could do. Okay? You know, there's something to be said for learning to become self-sufficient because no one knows what tomorrow's going to bring. And with that, it's a good thing to know. I've worked with women whose husbands have passed. They didn't know how to write a check. They didn't even know or have the deposit key to the deposit box. I thought that was very interesting. They didn't know where to begin. They were lost. And it wasn't because they weren't bright. They just would never taught or given it. I remember another couple was a doctor, and he found out he had cancer and it was terminal. And his wife wanted him to go through the chemo. She wanted to keep him as long as she could. And he said, I'm not going to have a quality of life. Why would I do that? But he took her home. He showed her everything. He took her to the insurance people that he worked with, the attorneys, the financial advisors, everything. She knew where everything was by the time he passed, and made life much easier for her. So that's another thing you have to think about when you live alone, or even if you're with someone, because you don't know that you might not be alone pretty quick. I hope not. I also think it's of great importance for women that live alone to know how to ask for help. Many of them don't want to ask for help, and help's out there. And if they're in that category where financially they're really struggling, there's all kinds of resources. Find out about them and don't be embarrassed to use those resources. Do you know that there's electric companies that help people keep their electric on in cold weather or their air on in hot weather when they find out that they're struggling or that it's just not enough? They have plans. There's just all kinds of resources, all kinds of nonprofit. And that's what they're there for. That's their job. A brighter side of growing older and living alone is how you can let go of things that you used to think were so important. You know, you find out that less and less is that important. You know, I tell you to live in the present. That's the way to go. I wish I knew it in my 20s or 30s. And providing, if you're going to be home all day, you can go around without a bra and you can stay in your PJs all day. Women love that. Did you know that, Beth? Freeing. What I had to do when I became alone is I had to sit myself down one day because I was going to work and coming home and going to work and coming home. And this is once my children had left. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do? You know, what do you think you should do with yourself? You don't go to a movie by yourself. You don't go out to eat. And so that's what I started to do. I taught myself how to do it. I didn't think I ever could, but I did. And I think I talked about that in another podcast and worked out really fine. Go to a restaurant, take a great book, and man, it's like heaven. You're at peace. You're being served. You're not cooking. You're not going to clean up. And you got yourself there and you're enjoying life. Yes, living alone doesn't have to be lonely. Those are two very different things. But you're never too old to change your attitude. You just think you can't change it. No one's told you or giving you permission to say, hey, this doesn't have to be that way. So throughout the U.S., there are many women on many blocks in many towns that live alone. On my block, for example, except for a very few families, like maybe 3, we are all either widowed, divorced, separated, or never been married, or single. 4 of us still work full-time. There are 3 widows. One has a full-time babysitter for her grandson, which takes up much of her time, but with great pleasure. And she's been a strong woman in her life, a wonderful, strong woman who's accomplished many things. Another takes care of her granddaughter on a frequent basis, and she's thrilled to death. She's enjoying herself with it. We have the 3rd widow who's mostly home, working in her yard, and the most gorgeous yard you want to see. To describe each woman, for me, having known them, they're each one very delightful in their own unique way. One neighbor is the welcoming committee for anyone who moves on the block. Years ago, they had a thing called the welcome wagon, and they used to bring you pamphlets and things about the area. It was really kind of helpful. They left a little gift. Well, she's the welcome wagon. She goes with a loaf of bread and the daily word. Is that not lovely? She gets their phone number, gives him her phone number, and she's the one that if somebody's out of town, she takes their packages and keeps them for them. And she'll take in the mail too if you ask her to. She knows what cars belong. We're dead end on each side. She knows which car belongs there and which cars don't, and she checks it out. Every block needs to have one person, a woman like that. There's a young, beautiful woman that lives directly across the street from me, and she's the quiet one in the group. You see her car going in, out to work, and then the garage goes back down, then she comes home, and the garage goes up, and she goes back in, and that's it. But she'd do anything for you. All you have to do is call. She's really quite a really sweet individual. Then there's another one who's single, and she is a gospel singer. She's actually a principal, but she's a gospel singer. In fact, she just released her first album. So there's got all these interesting women. We have the woman that stayed at home all of her life, raised her children, and used to take children in when she was first married and didn't have her own, and babysat. Always active, always doing something. Then we've got the woman that travels with her job, and she's single, and so we don't see much of her at all. But can you imagine the collective differences? But yet we just had the newest one that moved in. She works different hours, so we don't get to see much of her. But whenever you see her, there's the warmest hello, and the warm just vibes just come off of her, and you immediately want to get better acquainted with her. So that's the block. One of the widows almost gave me a heart attack when she came up behind me while I was unloading my groceries, or beginning to. She simply wanted to help. And all of a sudden, she's taking my groceries out of the car. And I said, you don't have to do this. She said, that's what neighbors for. She said, you just go inside, unlock your door, and I'll bring these in while you put them away. Well, she not only was going to help, but she had a plan for me. And just the way she said it, I did exactly what I was told to do. And I just couldn't get over that. And I could tell you story after story amongst all this group I've just mentioned. And so living alone can work. And maybe you haven't looked on your block and maybe know some of those women that are alone. And some of them might need a little help. Another widow, well, she's the woman who will come running if she hears or even suspects you need something. How did I meet her? She was going to be new. They hadn't gotten married yet, but she was going to get married and move in, and she was over at the house next to me, the man she was going to marry. I set my kitchen. I had a pan go up, not a pan, but the burner itself all of a sudden was in flames. I did not know what to do, and I had to cook for company that night. And I grabbed a bag of flour and I threw it on it. What made me think of flour, I don't know. It did put it out. But do you know how flour flies? My whole kitchen was flour. I was all flour. I mean, it goes everywhere. And I ran next door, hoping Bob would be home. Needed a man at that point, and he was the man until he passed. And I said, Bob, and he came to the door, and he looked. He didn't know me that well yet. And here he sees this ghost standing there. And I said, and I was kind of shaken, and I said, I've had a fire in and I don't know what to do. And he said, I'll be right over. He said, do you have a fire extinguisher? And I said, no, I don't. He just shook his head and he said, well, I'm going down to Home Depot and I'm going to get you a new burner. And I said, no, just tell me, I'll go get it. I'll take this. And he said, you sit down. He said, you sit down. I don't know. I must have looked horrible. And maybe thought I was close to a heart attack. I don't know what the poor soul thought, but there I was. And he said, you sit down there. I'm going to Home Depot. I have nothing better to do today. And I will pick up what you need. So I'm sitting there. And all of a sudden, the back door burst open. And in comes this woman and this young kid. And she says, I will be living next door to you. This was the fiance to Bob. And she's got 2 things of rolls of paper towel. And she's got Windex and all this stuff. And I'm looking and I get up and she takes my shoulder and sits me down. Now keep in mind, I'd never met her. And she said, I'm so-and-so. And she said, I understand I understand that my fiance told me that you had a little fire in here, she said, and that you were having company. She says, I have just made a big pot of chili, and I will give it to you for your company. But first of all, we got to get this kitchen cleaned. And I sat there, and they cleaned that kitchen. The whole thing. I would get up to try to do something. I'd get maybe one counter or something wiped off, and she'd make me go back and sit down. So that's the woman who goes and runs and does. Look on your block. It's fun, most of it. Maybe not. Maybe you haven't had the good luck to have that kind of people on your block. So in closing, I would like each of you to hear me really for just a second longer, because I'm going to ask you for a small favor. Would you be willing to ask one person this month to subscribe to our podcasts and our YouTube channel? There is no contest in any way, but this is the way we grow, and we would like to grow even more. We've had so many comments, good ones, that we want to continue to grow. So I would appreciate your time and any effort if you're willing to do that. One person, everyone that's listening today. And thank you in advance if you choose to do it. And if you don't, that's okay too. So I'm not sure what our next podcast is going to be. And you've heard that before from me. So that'll be the surprise. I just don't know yet. I have to wait to get that message, what I'm supposed to talk about. So God bless each and every one of you. And remember, keep the faith, never give up hope, and know when to let go. Thank you very much.